Welcome. This is Leading with Spirit, the show that gives you an in-depth look at topics like what it takes to navigate your spiritual journey, how to heal yourself and grow your spiritual gifts, and balanced practices to expand your business and your spiritual leadership. I'm your host, Spirit Bird, shamanic teacher, healer, and author, here to guide you on your journey to becoming your most potent spiritual leader. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today I have the owner and founder of Somastery, Kaira Mayestra. Somastery is a company that's making high quality somatic therapy certification trainings accessible and affordable. Kaira's vision to co-create thriving lives and radical healing through somatics, personal development, and business wisdom has created her company, and we're here to chat with her today. Welcome, Kaira.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Hello.
So I got to start with the obvious question. Of course, a lot of people in the healing work and embodiment work are familiar with somatics, but let's just go ahead and start with that right off the bat.
That's a good question to start with because there's a lot of misunderstanding about somatics and what it means. It's a really new idea, I think. So the word somatic just means in relation to the body as opposed to the mind. So as opposed to like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're working with the mind to try to create change in how a person is feeling and really behaving, we're working with the emotions and the subconscious and the body to create change on the behavioral and cognitive levels. So that's true somatic therapy. And I just want to say that, like, yes, any therapy or modality that's working with the body, like yoga, EMDR, the eye movement therapy, EFT, the tapping therapy, dance therapies, all of those are, technically somatic therapies. But the branch of somatic therapy that I was trained in by way of Somatic Experiencing International and by way of medicine work and shamanic trainings is really a branch of somatics that actually came from working with plant medicines. It came from observing ayahuasca and DMT. And the main difference here is that it's based off working with the 5 channels of awareness. So the different ways that humans experience reality, that's what the entire therapy is based off of. And I can explain a little bit more about how that works with plant medicines, but I think that's a good foundational description.
Yeah, well, so for somebody who hasn't worked with somatics, like what would an experience with this kind of therapy be like for them? What would they be opening to or clearing?
Mm-hmm. So what it really is almost like a guided meditation where the person that is working with you is going to be asking questions that move your focus, your awareness around these 5 channels. And just briefly, we have the mind channel, which we're in right now. It's the part of us that uses words, that draws correlations, that makes meaning out of things and uses narrative. And then we have the imagination channel, any of our imagined senses, our memories, this is a very, very creative channel, but visualization, the imagined sense of sound or touch or taste. And then in the middle, we have posture, which is a great example of how all of these channels are always on. We as humans come equipped with all of these. Whether we're noticing them or not is a different thing. Our awareness can be tuned into one of them and we're noticing it, or it can be in different places and we're not noticing it. But like the posture channel kind of shows us, our bodies are always in a position, whether we're noticing it or not. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you're really in the posture channel, that's like when you're in a yoga flow or you're into a dance that you're doing and you're just feeling your body and the movement of it. That's being in the posture channel. Then these lower channels is what I call them, is body sensations, inner sensations. Is a whole place that our awareness can be and tune into, and then emotions. So an experience with a practitioner is going to be really them asking questions to move your awareness into different channels with the goal of accessing stuck survival energy, stuck fight or flight energy in the nervous system and helping give that an avenue out of the body. So it's really facilitating energetic purges in a really safe way that works with the science of the nervous system. What's really cool about this therapy is that it's science-based. It's a really perfect intersection of spirituality and science, because it's based on our fundamental understanding of the nervous system and real observable phenomenon for mammals. But it's working with these really spiritual constructs, our trauma, our emotions, our memories, our body-based agreements with life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How did you get into this work initially?
By accident.
Yeah.
I think a lot of trauma therapists and people that are in healing roles. I'm sorry, I need to clear my.
Good.
Too much coffee, not enough water. I think a lot of people in healing roles really got there because they needed healing and they had to learn about it. So I went through kind of the gauntlet, just like a trauma gauntlet, until everything really broke down when I was 25. And I had a lot of complex PTSD symptoms and really was just left like, it's either I heal or I give up fully on life because I can't function anymore. And my short-term memory was gone. I was having crazy sores break out all over my body, and the doctors were like, "We don't know what's wrong with you. Go away." There was just like there were so many different symptoms that I couldn't ignore, and so I started looking for healing. I'd already been a massage therapist for many years at that point, already been working with psychedelics recreationally, but I got into trying to use them intentionally for healing. And through that, I ended up accidentally at a DMT ceremony, which I never thought I would do DMT. I've never done ayahuasca at that point, and I thought DMT was kind of a bastardization of ayahuasca. I
Gotcha.
thought
Yeah.
like I didn't know much about it, but I kind of thought like it was just something white people did to be disrespectful because I knew about the indigenous heritage of ayahuasca and how sacred it was. And so I didn't mean to go to this ceremony, but I was intuitively led there, then found out what we were doing. And the shaman convinced me to stay. She's like, "You told me intuitively, you knew you had to be here. Like, there's a reason you're here."
Mm-hmm.
And so I was invited after that ceremony. I had a very interesting experience, really different than the rest of the group. And the person told me, she's like, "Ayahuasca or DMT has chosen you. Would you like to work with her? And would you like to come on and be a facilitator for these ceremonies?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. It chose me." I was like, such a sucker for people talking like that. So I was like,
Sure.
"Yes, please." And through that kind of learned through doing this 2-year mentorship with her, the DMT started showing me how it was working on people. It showed me these 5 channels of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It showed me that it would move the awareness around and the person would go into these different postures and then they would feel these inner sensations and then they would have these emotional releases and the mind would come back online. They would see visuals. Like I saw the map of it really through working with the medicine enough. And I tried to create my own therapy to mimic what the DMT was doing. And then I found somatic experiencing therapy, which was so similar to what I was creating. And when I went to school for it, I actually talked to some people that studied under one of the pioneers of that branch of somatic therapy. And they said that he learned it from ayahuasca. He said, "Ayahuasca taught me this, and now this is what I'm doing." And so it's really, really cool because this really was a plant medicine based modality. It was a modality that was truly created by watching how psychedelics function and learning directly from the plant medicine and mimicking it sober. And so because of that, it's a really cool therapeutic pair with psychedelics, but it works for people that don't even want to explore psychedelic medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It works in the same way by doing the same things with our awareness that the plants do. And that's how I got into it.
Yeah, fascinating. That's interesting. We mentioned this briefly before the call, but I love to have, I didn't actually share this with you. I really love having both pieces because I kind of have my background was with some pretty formal shamanic training for years where we didn't work with psychedelics or really like plant medicines at all. And then I also had like a time in my when I was younger where I used psychedelics recreationally. And then somewhere in the shamanic training, I got pretty snooty and I put the psychedelics down and I was like, "You don't even need that." Like, you can experience all of this without it. And I kind of thought it was like cheating for a while. And then years went by and I kind of just like, back up, but something happened, things changed, and I suddenly was interested. I had started working with psilocybin personally and like kind of stumbled around how to use it intentionally, and then started to fold that into the training and the work. And similarly, I had like a sudden like call specifically with ayahuasca. And before that, I was not interested in it. I had been around a lot of people that had worked with it before that had like not the greatest experiences, but it was just like a ping, it's time. And I was clear about where I wanted to work with it. Person showed up. And then, within another year, I was training and facilitating this work too. And I love having both. I love like the power and beauty of working with the medicines and how they bring people together. But I also love not having to use them and being able to access, the teachings from them without having to be on, a substance at the time. So I really appreciate, your perspective and that you're also bringing those two pieces together. So, so I'd like to actually hear a little bit about when you decided to launch your company and like take what you'd been noticing forward facing.
Yeah. To speak, first of all, that's so cool. And I love learning about your journey through this process. I love that you're prioritizing flexibility in the modalities that we're bringing to people so that we can be really attuned to what we need in terms of our own interpersonal change and spiritual development, and for other people to have a flexibility of your skill set with plant medicine and sober. And I think, speaking to that, business has been the most spiritually and emotionally evolving thing for me ever. Trauma healing and going on the journey to heal my own trauma taught me so much and helped me learn and helped me become a better person. But when I finally healed enough of my trauma, the question becomes not how do I survive and be okay? It becomes, okay, well, now I'm okay. How do I thrive? And for me, that looked like owning my desire to be financially free. And so I was really starting to do work on my own mindset around money. I know the first time that it kind of popped into my awareness that I needed to do some work around rewiring my relationship with money was I was in a relationship and I really thought we might go the distance. So I started having conversations around finances and getting a house together eventually. And he was like, I do not want to focus on money. That is disgusting. People with money are bad people. I want nothing to do with it. And I was like, oh no, I've been believing all of this and now suddenly I'm aware of it. And that's probably not doing me any favors. And I probably should rethink some of this stuff because that's not the life I want to live. I don't want to be broke forever. And so I started doing some work around that. That was probably like 5 years ago at this point. And then I started to do psychedelic facilitation a little bit more. And as I began to work on my own subconscious constructs around money and around what it meant in terms of service, the more money I make as a representation of the more people I serve and the better transformations I can provide, the more money naturally comes in. And like, as I worked with these constructs, my psychedelic facilitation got really, I was making a lot of money with it and I was doing really, really beautiful things with it. And had an array of like, low cost offers and higher cost offers. But I really wanted to own a business that I could do online. Yes to the psychedelic facilitation, but I wanted to work with people from anywhere in the world. It was all desire based. I had a desire to have like location freedom and to build something bigger, like that really was, I was seeing some people around me do it. And I was like, they can do it. I can do it. And started to really believe in myself. And so I took a leap and stopped doing the psychedelic facilitation, moved back to Denver. And I was like, the only reason I wouldn't move back to Denver is if I didn't believe I could make it work. If I didn't believe I could start an online company. So I like chose to really take the leap and believe in myself. And that was about 2 years ago. And since then have built a multi-6-figure company teaching somatic therapy, like the methods that I developed. And now moving into teaching business because I really believe like after all of the spiritual and emotional transformation that came with me building a business, I realized like there are so many people that would benefit from this journey, the journey of making ourselves financially free because the journey to building a business is going to force you to come into contact with every part of you that has limiting beliefs, that doesn't believe in yourself, that has hangups around money. Like, it's going to force you to do subconscious rewiring around all of your fears and all of your resistance to thriving. And that journey was greatly helped by me knowing somatic therapy, because I could do the work on my unconscious and have it be directly reflected to me in how my business was doing. So it was like such a cool journey. And I just want to help people walk that path if that's something that they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like you tend to lead more with the inner work first and the business strategy second.
Yeah. So instead of, and I had a great mentor that I kind of came across named Melanie Ann Layer, who I just loved. And she was really, I didn't even buy her programs for a very long time. I just listened to different podcasts she'd been interviewed on. And so I started mimicking this idea that I didn't first ask myself, what do I do? First, I would ask myself, who am I going to be as I look for the answer? And I would start with the emotional foundation of my beliefs, of my emotional energetics. I read a lot of Joe Dispenza during this time. I learned how to meditate. I focused on feeling like the version of myself that was bringing in $20,000 months. And when I could feel her in my body, then I would ask myself the questions of like, okay, well, what do I do here? What do I build? What do I create? How do I market? And everything was emotionally based first. Mm-hmm. And then I would begin to problem solve. And I think that that's honestly like the way that works the best. But I also, I teach a little bit about how the mechanisms in the brain are designed to recognize what we have decided is important. We call it confirmation bias. But when something's emotionally important to us, we see it everywhere reflected in our surroundings. Mm-hmm. Like if you start dating somebody who has a certain kind of car, and then suddenly you see that car everywhere. And it was already there before, but it wasn't important to you. So when we make it important to us to notice the way that our gratitude helps bring in money, or the way that our emotional self is helping us recognize ideas that are moving us forward. Like the more we believe it's true, the more true it is. And so for me, it just feels like this inherent obvious truth that the more that you can be the version of yourself that lives there, the easier it's going to be to get there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious because there's a theme that I've been tracking lately, kind of just around, like, I feel like we're in this big shakeup right now, currently, right? It's like the whole world is like shaking. And generally, when I find these moments, for me, I try to do the opposite of what I normally do. So if I'm normally like push, then I'm like, okay, slow the fuck down, just stop, wait for the inspiration or the information or vice versa. Mm. And I've also just been noticing this place of like, but being careful not to overcorrect, like not to go to the extreme opposite, but instead do the opposite, but like one small step, right? So we're not like doing this big pendulum swing. And I'm curious with your work and with business, if that has shown up for you. Like, actually just feel what my question is here. How are you moving towards your vision for what you want to bring to the world and your business without running into this fear that if you actually succeed, that you might like tip the balance or go too far, become, the person that represents all of the horrible things in the world?
It's a great question. I love it because this is a fear for all of us. Like, not only, oh, what'll happen if I get what I want? It probably won't be good anyway. Or like, what if I become the devil on the journey? There's two core concepts I want to bring in here. So one of them that I really, really love, also taken from Melanie and Lair, was positive energy versus negative energy. Where's my come from? Am I trying not to experience something, or am I trying to experience something? Mm-hmm. So if I move from the fear, like with the motivation of, I don't want to become this, so I'm going to do this because I don't want to experience that, or I don't want to be that way, or I don't want to, have that in my life. That's not the same as moving towards what I do want. It's actually a fully different It's a fully different construct. So instead of like, I'm aware of the stuff that I don't want to happen, and I'm aware of who I don't want to be, but it's not a part of my reality to focus on it. What I do focus on is I just let that inform, like, okay, well, what do I want to be? I'm only interested in moving towards that. I'm only interested in having a business that thrives and having the only impact of it be positive. I don't focus on the fact that I don't want to have bad experiences, or I don't want to have bad impact. I'm focused on the fact that I do want to have good impact. And so I just continue to, like, when those fears come up, I let them inform what I do want. And then I put all the focus on what I do want and continue moving towards it. And the second thing here is that, well, I guess it's not as relevant. I'm such a talker. I'm long-winded.
Do it. Let's go there.
Is this demonization of our desires, especially as female-bodied beings or feminine souls. I think that there is like a cultural stigmatization of our desires. And I think we talk ourselves out of what we desire because we don't think it'll be as good when we get there, or we think that we have to sacrifice something in order to have it. I see this a lot when people want to build their businesses. They're like, I want to make 5,000 a month. I'm like, great, but do you want to make 10? They're like, well, yeah, but like that doesn't feel possible. I'm like, I didn't ask if it felt possible. I asked if you wanted it. Do you want it? A lot of times we just go for what feels doable instead of what we want. And a lot of times people are like, yeah, I want to make 10, but then I won't get to spend time with my family. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who decided that for you? Like, that's not even true. But these things, these kind of unconscious assumptions about what it means when you get to have it, we need to piece those apart and really be able to do that. And so the way that I was able to do this kind of stuff was that a lot of times it's not enough to just recognize a mental construct. Mm-hmm. You have to deprogram it in the body. You have to feel as though it's no longer true for it to actually be that way. So this is where like somatics really came into it for me. I'm trying to think of like a really good example that I can drive this point home with.
I know, I was about to ask you if you have one.
Great. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to like think and feel differently about money in a way that's more productive for my journey through business or being an entrepreneur or being a healer. And I recognize that there is this belief that if I make money, I might become a bad person. I think that that's like in some way relatable to a lot of people because there's so much cultural conditioning and programming around like people with money are the bad ones. Mm-hmm. People with money are the villains. And so even if I look at this in my mind channel, this one over here, and I'm like, that's not true. I don't want to believe that's true. So I'm going to look for examples of people that have money that are also good people, or people that are doing good things with their money. Okay, that might move the needle forward a little bit. But if our body sensations and emotions, if these lower channels are still reacting to the idea of money with sensations of tightness, or with emotions of fear or guilt or shame, then it doesn't matter what we decide to think about it, because our body, our unconscious mind is really, really has the steering wheel to our reality. A great example would be when you ask to buy something for a person, like a coffee or a gift or a dinner, and they're just like, oh, no, don't do that. And they don't have a lot of money, but they're saying no to support and they're saying no to receiving. They're not doing this because they're thinking about it wrong. They're doing it because they feel guilty, or they feel uncomfortable, or they feel they have maybe subconscious constructs that think that if we allow somebody to pay for us, that we are giving away our power or agency. Like, there's all sorts of stuff there. Right. But we need to change the way that our emotions and our body sensations are reacting to stimuli, whether that's money, or whether it's work, or whether it's our personal power, or like whatever it is. So somatics helps us kind of surgically go into constructs to rewire how we're feeling in our body about them and how we're feeling in our emotions about them. And it's a whole system for rewiring how our deep self is responding to stimuli. And so I used it to change who I was being, how I was feeling emotionally and physically about money and about being seen and about imposter syndrome and about like all of the little things along the way were so helped by me being able to do this therapy on myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely resonate. I brought back memories of like when I was a kid, my cousin and I would like, we would get to where we would like mail money back and forth to each other because we would both be like, no, you're paying. No, you're, like it was like this ongoing fight for like most of our young adulthood. It's so silly. And I still get hit by that at some point. And I think for me, there was like a moment where I realized I was on the other end where I really wanted to give to someone. Like I was repaying a favor that they did for me and they were blocking it. They wouldn't let me receive it. And like a couple things happened. One, it didn't feel good to me because I was like, I feel like, I want you to have this. This is like the completion of like the gratitude cycle that, you gave something to me and I don't give something in return. And now it's complete. And also then it makes it just kind of like complicated because now I'm like, well, do I owe you for something else? Or like, it turned it into this really convoluted place. Until I kind of just had to realize, okay, well, that's not mine, and like tend my own level of like, well, if they're not going to accept my gratitude offer, that's going to just have to be okay. And I'll have to just receive that as a gift too. But it's so interesting all the things that we do. And what I love about somatic work in general is I feel like we can get to really potent place really fast. And you don't necessarily have to get caught up in all of the like languaging around why it was or is or what to do, and get right into the body to move the feeling.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate any like technique to accomplishing a goal that just goes right to the heart of it, right to the heart of the issue, right to the heart of the solution. Like, I don't want to waste my time with the fluff or the red tape or the, brilliant thoughts somebody has unless they actually accomplish the thing I want them to accomplish. Like, and so I really appreciate that kind of stuff. Also, just like kudos for the amount of emotional mastery it takes to be in an uncomfortable experience and be like, I choose to receive this as a gift. there must be medicine in here for me somewhere. I'm determined to find it. Like, that's way to go. I love when people do that. It's so beautiful to me.
It's tricky. It's like, wait a second, I'm doing the same thing they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually backtracking a little bit, but we talked a little bit about the intersection of psychedelics and somatics. And can you just share a little bit more about like how you like to bring those pieces, why you feel like they're so beneficial together?
Yeah. I think first of all, I was always just like, I wanted to go rogue from a very young age. Like, I just didn't really see the world the same way. And so I wanted to do things a little bit differently, just kind of like as a spirit. That's who I always was. And I think psychedelics appealed to me because they were a little bit stigmatized, and I liked to root for the underdog, and I wanted to understand what they were about. And I had so many magical experiences on them, experiences that really amplified my intuitive nature, and I saw the goodness of them and it made me want to fight for them. And so working with them was pretty par for the course. But what I loved to do eventually was I realized that when you utilize somatics with psychedelics, you didn't need as much of the psychedelics. So when I started working with psilocybin, I started with 3-gram journeys, which is a lot, especially for somebody like me. I'm sensitive to everything. So when I would give a person 3 grams, they would have like these pretty big experiences. And I realized like this was overwhelming to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. What if I gave them less and did this therapy with them while we were doing it? And it worked out so well, because with cognitive behavioral therapies and therapies that work with the mind, you can't do them with psychedelics. Like you're basically working with a child. The person's brain is working like it does when they're a child. Their synapses are just like firing. It's almost synesthesia, like very creative, very distractible. And so doing regular therapies wouldn't work. But with somatics, because they're working the way that the plant medicines work anyway, it actually paired beautifully. And a person on 1 gram of mushrooms suddenly could go in and out of an experience that felt like a 3 or 5 gram experience, but you had the control to be able to help them come out of it if they got overwhelmed, which made it way safer, way more trauma safe.
Mm-hmm.
And because this therapy is really good at working with trauma, you could, I guess a really good way to say this is that with a lot of different somatic modalities, they work great. You can have massively life-shifting experiences with breath work or with EMDR or with dancing or yoga. You know, those are my favorite. But what they're not great at is being very like focused, very much being like, okay, this is the thing you want to work on. We're going to go exactly there.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like luck of the draw with a lot of somatic therapies. But with somatics, you could really, especially when a person was on psychedelic medicine and it made them a little bit more open, you could get very surgical about exactly the trauma and exactly where it was in the body and really like guide the session towards that if you knew what you were doing. And so I just really loved the blend of those modalities together. It was so life-changing for so many people. I loved doing it. And then I realized that I could probably do better work in the world if I started teaching what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have more of an impact on the world if I started teaching it. And luckily, I just really, really love to teach.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. I moved into that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious, what do you love about yourself when you're teaching this work?
Oh, I love that question. That's so beautiful. I love how easy I've decided that this gets to be. When I teach, I know this material like the back of my hand. This is not something I know cognitively. I have lived it. I have lived every piece of it. I have all of the information laced into my bones. And so, though I have lesson plans and sometimes presentations, I love about myself that all I need to do is show up and just like channel. It's so effortless. It's not, I don't have to do, I don't have to push. I just get to show up and just let it come out of me. It's like the information wants so badly to live in this world. And I've just been completely non-resistant to letting it live through me. And so it feels like being a channel for something beautiful. And that's what I love to do the most in life. It's like, that's what my music is all about. I don't know if you knew, but I'm a musician as well. And I just love that about me, that I've learned how to just open up and let something beautiful move through me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually was curious where that came into the fold with your work as well. Do you consider yourself a musician first and then kind of the healing journey started? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
I consider myself a channel first, and everything lives through that.
Yeah.
So actually my last name, Mayestra, my name was chosen. I chose my name at a point when I just realized that I couldn't go by my old name anymore. Even though I loved my old name, it just didn't fit. And so I chose Kaira Mayestra. And Maestra it's kind of a play on the feminine form of maestro, which is a conductor, like a conductor of a symphony, but a conductor being a conduit, like copper or gold is, where there's just something for energy to move through into the world. And when I chose that last name, that's what I decided was for me. So on my trauma healing journey of like healing from what happened in my mid-20s, I looked for healing like a person with their head on fire looks for water. There was nothing else that mattered. And after a couple years, the symptoms went away and there were more trials. And I just like was relentless about like, I'm not just a survivor of these things. I am going to thrive. I am going to be victorious and live a life that is beautiful, not in spite of the trauma, but because of it. Like, I am not just shelving these things as like terrible pieces of my history. I'm going to fully alchemize all of the pain that is there. And I am going to live a coherent life that puts none of me on the back burner because it still hurts. Mm-hmm. All of it gets to come. And there was a point in that journey after like working with the DMT and having this really crazy experience on the top of a mountain in Crestone that is so wild. I don't usually tell the story because I don't think people would believe it. But when I came back down from there, my whole world changed. And it was like the last piece of resistance in my body to the pain evaporated. And suddenly I understood that I like had my own mythos for the divine feminine, or this facet of God consciousness finally could fully use me, because I finally stopped resisting the pain of the experience that I had gone through. And it was at that point where like the next 3 months were just full on magic. And I ended up moving into into a really beautiful mountain house in Boulder. And there was a period of 5 days where all of these songs just like came in. And it wasn't me. Like it felt like something landed in my body for 5 days and wrote music. And I would look at my journal the next day and just be like sobbing, being like, what is coming out of me? Like, what is this? And then I literally told the music after that, I'm not doing the broke coffee shop lifestyle thing. I'm trying to like figure out my financial reality. Like, no, thank you to that life. You get out into the world. If you want people to hear you, you do it. Like, I'm not responsible for this.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, the recording just happened with one of the best recording producers in LA and one of the best studio musicians I've ever met. Just like it happened to just fall in my lap for free, which is unbelievable. And then a label literally found me, and suddenly my music was all over the world. And it was like, whoa, I was just a channel for this to move through. And it made me realize what beautiful things could happen in the world when I just stepped into that as like if I believed it, that was my ability to just channel something beautiful into the world. And so now I'm more collaborating with the muse. And like this, I just recorded an album. It'll be out in a couple of months. And this one was more of a collaboration with spirit, because I've decided to like co-create now instead of just let things come through me. I now want to like co-create.
Yes.
So there's more responsibility that I'm taking now for the things I'm putting out into the world. But at that time, it was just like pure magic.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, thank you for naming that last piece, because that's something that I obviously am very passionate about. And
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't get talked a lot. There's a lot about like being used by spirit. And there's some of the like, I feel like it's the kind of the wounded version of the realm of spirit, is that like, if it's just supposed to happen, it'll happen and anything goes. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. This is actually a partnership in which, you know, both you and spirit have, you know, responsibility and a co-creation, and spirit actually wants you to, you know, be that kind of, you know, individual or sovereign, so that you can find that middle ground. And that's where all that beautiful kind of like mature magic is born.
Well, it feels like humble to be like, oh, this wasn't mine.
Aha.
It just came through me. And I like totally bought into that for a while, until somebody was like, girl, you're shirking your responsibility. It chose you. It could have chosen anybody. It chose you. That means you have a responsibility here for the co-creation of it. And so I really spent 3 years trying to become the person that music believed that I was. And when I felt like I had, then it was time for the next album. And I was like, all right, now I got some stuff to say. Like,
yes,
because now I'm more of an embodiment of that, you know, as it came through this time than it was when I was an embodiment of the songs when they came through, but like I didn't know it fully. And now there's more of a responsibility that I'm taking. And I think that that's really important. I love that you're speaking to this, because it is a shirking of our responsibility when we just say like, oh, it was spirit that did it. That's the same thing as like the Crusades being like, God told us to. Did God? Well, you're deciding what you did with what God told you to do. And it's kind of messed up. So
yeah. Well, and you're right that it oftentimes it is like with humbleness, or with the thought that it's being humble. That's so much part of the rhetoric, that you wouldn't actually claim your power. So I'm also curious if you have time, because, you know, this is partially a podcast about spiritual gifts, and that's what a lot of my work is about, how to develop those. And, you know, I talk to people all the time that have had wild spiritual experiences and don't ever share them because they sound insane. So I have to ask, because you kind of bumped over it around, if you would mind sharing a little bit about your experience up on the.
First of all, like if anybody is, you know, finding inspiration from this, the one thing that I would say to you on your own spiritual journey, the thing that's going to bring about, I think, the most magic, in my opinion, is authenticity. Be truthful with yourself about your pain, about your desires, about yourself. That was the thing that led me to every magical thing that happened in my life, was I couldn't ignore the truth of what I was feeling. And I learned that there are so many different aspects of the truth, and that our nervous system requires a certain amount of like peace and rest and leaning into the things that hurt. But what happened on that mountain was wild. So I'll try to tell this as briefly as I can, because it sounds fucking crazy. But I intuitively knew that I had to go to this thing when I saw somebody post it online. I'm not going to say who it was that led the ceremony, just in case. But there was a retreat in Crestone, and we were going to hike up this really magical mountain. He said that there was a couple different places in the world that had so much magic infused in them. Shasta was one of those places, for an example. But this mountain in Crestone, just for no reason at all, had like 100 different ashrams and stupas and spiritual sites built around the base of it. And it's not that well known, but we woke up at like 6 a.m, ate some food, and then hiked uphill for like 10 hours. And no food for the whole day as we're prepping for these ceremonies. And we take the first drink. It's a DMT, but it's like a liquid, and you drink it. And as soon as we drink it, about hour 8, he was like, okay, he looks at me. He's like, you're here to open a portal for the divine feminine to enter the world. That is what you're here to do. And you're supposed to sing. And I was like, how did you know I was a singer for ceremonies? He's like, I didn't, like, Spirit told me. So he pointed to this rock, like what I thought was like a couple 100 yards away. And it was this pyramid shaped rock. He's like, you're supposed to go and you're supposed to sing and open up a portal for her to come into this world. Mm. And so everybody drinks their drink, and then it hits us like majorly. And it is so psychedelic and so insane. And everybody is just like dropping to the ground and like wrapping themselves around rocks. And I just get tunnel vision for this rock. And I could barely hold it together enough to just put one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. Like, I have a mission. I'm here to do a thing, like one foot in front of the other. Everybody's behind me, it's like 2 miles to this rock. And I was bleeding at the time, and I emptied my diva cup and like pour my blood at the base of the rock, and then was instructed to climb. I was like, I can't get up here. He's like, climb it. I'm like, okay. So rock climbing up to the top of this pyramid shaped rock. And I start to sing. And eventually I literally see her in my mind's eye, and I had my eyes closed, and there was this woman, this big woman at the base of the rock. And I see her energy come up right in front of me, and she looks at me. And I was told that if I would see the divine feminine, that she would shy away from me, which I thought was weird. All parts of that sentence I thought were weird. But instead of shying away from me, she looked me straight in the eye like, yeah, you get it. And I saw that all of the pain I had experienced in the past couple of years, it wasn't for nothing. Like, it was for a very specific purpose. Because when the feminine leadership, when the matriarchies died, was when the agricultural revolution started, and we stopped running off intuition and tribal cultures, and we started moving into a more masculine paradigm where we were harnessing the energy of the earth instead of flowing with it. And there was a betrayal of the feminine that happened at that time on a like kind of mystic cultural level, or that's one way of thinking of it. And I understood betrayal, because that's what a lot of the trauma had been around for me. And I just met her, and I was like, I'm yours, like, forever. This woman, like, I'm here for you. My voice is for you. My life is for you. Like, that is what I'm here for, is for you. And then we hiked the rest of the 2 hours up to this alpine lake, and I jumped in it. I'm so excited we're there, because we can finally smoke this DMT and eat something and like go home. And I jumped in the lake off this one rock. Everybody's taking their DMT ceremonies. I take it last. And I was like, there's still this calcified anger inside of me for the person that hurt me. Mm-hmm. And I just want it moved. And everybody else had laid down with like a blindfold on to take their ceremony. And so he is kind of touching places on my stomach as I'm in the medicine space. And I channel like light language, just sounds that move emotion. And so he's like touching certain places, and my voice would like cut off, and I would block up, and then suddenly my voice would open up again, and I would be able to move energy again. And he did that all the way up into my chest. And then he was like, you need to get up. you need to go over to the Alpine lake. You need to sit on this rock. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. And I was still in the medicine as he moved me onto this rock, and he's like, look out into the water. And so I do. And everything's really quiet until suddenly something comes through the water, through the rock I'm sitting on, into my body. And it's so much energy. I fully collapse. I'm on my hands and knees, like pulling into myself. And then suddenly I just start screaming again and again and again. Like, I've never heard sounds like this come out of a human body. It was wild how loud and how fierce it was. And then afterwards, I just started laughing. And I knew it was over. Like, the story I had been playing out for my whole life up till that point was over. And I got off the rock, and eventually the shaman was like, that wasn't just for you. Like, that scream was for so much more than just you. It was for her. And I felt like there was this like metaphor, this mystical kind of mythos of me being like a body that could process for the collective and for the divine feminine to be a channel for the things that I chose with my human body and voice and mind and actions to manifest into this world. And that's not even the craziest part, because of then the shaman did the medicine, and we were all sitting around him, and I start to sing, and eventually he sits up and is like, look right there, right there. And he points to this outcropping in the rock. And he's like, focus, focus. And then we all hear this deafening rock slide sound. Just, it's like the mountain was opening up from the inside, and we're all like, what is going on? None of us are high anymore. None of us are in a medicine space anymore. And it was so loud, I thought the mountain was going to collapse. And we didn't see anything visually, but it was like it happened from the inside of that outcropping, that there was this massive movement of rock and debris. And then he said that he had done that on 9 different mountain peaks throughout Colorado, and he had been opening them up. And it sounds crazy. Like, that sounds crazy, but I was there. I don't know if I would believe it if I hadn't actually experienced it. But there was like 6 of us that heard it, and that were all like, what just happened? Like, and it went on for like a minute, you know. It was like a long experience. And coming off of that mountain, everything changed. I was living in the same town. I saw nobody that I used to see. I only saw new faces. I went to the same types of events. There was only new experiences that I had there. I ended up being invited to move into this freaking mansion for like an affordable price. Like, everything in my entire reality shifted. It was like I went into a different dimension, and life has never been the same since. And it's like, whatever you're going through, no matter how terrible it is, I have such faith for pain and the medicine of suffering, because I understand what can come on the other side as a result of you choosing to stay with the alchemy, to stay with the pain, to learn the lesson there, to see it as a potential gift into your most beautiful life. And like, I know suffering. And so I made a career out of helping people suffer well and helping people heal from the pit of their own crisis, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was as short as I can tell that story. There was a lot that happened, but I hope that's okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm just going to pause for a moment here.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, letting that message continue to ripple out.
You seem like you're hearing something intuitively.
For me, what I'm experiencing right now, I don't even know where this mountain is, but it feels almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like aftershocks from after you share the story. I feel like they're moving their way through the land that I'm on, and probably the land for the listeners now and in the future.
there are biblical references to the fact that that God can move mountains, and I feel like this stuff is crazy. And if for anybody that is feeling those aftershocks, I encourage you to take what you will from this and leave what's not for you.
Mm.
And I trust that you can do that. And I also trust that there are a lot of people that are newer to their own spiritual gifts and newer to reality. You don't have to have experiences that are so crazy to find so much meaning and transformation in the mundane. That's where all of us live most of our lives. And if any part of that seems, outlandish or not for you, please leave it. It's, for me, it felt so holy and so transformational, and the repercussions of it have been only beautiful things. And so I trust the goodness of that experience. But yeah, definitely, I know stories like that can spook people, I think, a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Either they don't believe it or they're like, whoa, too much.
Gotcha.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I love sharing them more because I find that a lot of us tone them down or don't at all. And so many people do have an experience, that maybe not like that, but that has been so definitive or so clearly real and significant and insane, that it's like you as the individual know that it means something, but it doesn't often go beyond that. And yeah, sometimes it's like there's witnesses and physical things happening, and sometimes it's like the most subtle little blip, you know. And I find that the more we just talk about what actually happened for us, the more it can open up that sort of permission for us to just be like, oh, that was my experience,
Yeah, so much yes to that. So much for people finding permission in that story and inspiration. The inspiration that I hope to give people is like that moment of such victory was dependent upon like 4 years of solid suffering, like solid crisis, solid like psyche melting pain. So if something so beautiful could come from that, maybe it can from your own struggles, like whoever you are. Maybe something really beautiful, maybe something equally as beautiful as your suffering is waiting for you on the other side of that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to kind of tie it back up with this place of collaboration and really partnership, there's a lot of talk about bringing the feminine back. And I'm just getting a little bit from your journey that, to me, I feel like, well, it's not really about the return to the feminine. Like we went from feminine to masculine, now we're going back to feminine. We're actually moving back just like into partnership. Right. And
Yeah.
and I think what we're on right now is a place of both the integrating both of those places, but actually acknowledging, at least what it sounds like to me from your journey, is acknowledging the pain from what the feminine felt, so we can find that gift or that conscious version of the partnership we're seeking.
I think not shutting off the pain is a major step, but also like I had this like inspiration come through the other day, which is that I really want to help set women free, most of all from themselves, because we're the ones that are dampening our voices. We're the ones that are prioritizing fitting in as opposed to speaking our truth. We're the ones that are believing the lies that we're not powerful. We're the ones that are telling ourselves we can't figure it out, or we're not capable, or we don't know how. We're the ones believing that. And so the reclamation of your own power, I think, is like the biggest part of the process. But I think we don't have access to our power unless we have access to all parts of ourselves, including our pain and our anger and our fear. And like, if we're not willing to feel all of it, the joy, the pleasure, the desire, the gratitude, and the mess of it and the pain of it, then we're cutting off our access to our emotional well of so much depth and so much potency. And I think like just reclaiming all pieces of ourselves and reclaiming our authority over ourselves, our power, is like, oh God, I'm like so damped up right now. Like, oh, it's so delicious. Like so much yes to that.
Mm-hmm. So you have now we're gonna pop into the practical again.
How do we end that? Yeah.
You have a beautiful offer. It's the fundamentals of somatics training.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be sure to share the link to that in the show notes, and people can find it through all of your channels, of course, too. Can you share just a touch on that and anything else that you have going on that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So one of my favorite reviews on this was somebody watched it with their 17-year-old daughter, and their 17-year-old daughter's like, I've learned more in 1 hour of this series than I have in 5 years of therapy. And that's kind of like the vibe, is that by learning about these 5 channels of awareness, which is what the fundamentals of somatics teaches about, is the 5 channels of awareness. So the same thing that I learned from ayahuasca or from DMT, it teaches you what each channel is and how to use it for emotional alchemy, and just gives like, an intro to the core concept of somatic therapy. And I think it's a fantastic series. There's so much value in there. So if that's a really, really great way to start tapping into my work, whether you're interested in learning business with me eventually, or whether you're interested in a somatics training or a psychedelics training, like it all kind of starts from here. So it's a really good place to begin.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And again, we'll share your links and everything so people can find you. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, like Facebook, we have a Facebook group, which I do free weekly trainings in. It's an awesome, like, it's just the best. I love it in there so much. And so if you're looking for free content, that's an excellent place to go. And other than that, I just want to thank you. Your work and who you are being is potent, and you can see it and you can feel it in the way that you speak. Like there's clearly so much work that you've done. And I really, really believe in the ripple effect of that and what that does for the world. And thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you for your words. Thank you for being open and sharing, where you're at, and let me poke around.
100%.
Yes. And this was fun. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye. Welcome to today's Member Query episode, where we explore questions about spiritual paths, intuitive gifts, growing a spiritual business, and shamanism. Do you have a question for us? Send us a DM at Holton Healing Arts. This question is from another one of our Leading with Spirit private Facebook group members. The question is, how do you become a shaman? And of course, I'm going to give you the real basic kind of step-by-step process. Just understand that, of course, it's not as quite this simple. I mean, it is quite this simple, but becoming a shaman is something that's a lifelong journey. There's not a point where you have finished it, or that it's finally true, or you're finally real and other people aren't. This work is accessible to anybody. It is a spectrum on how much and what parts of it you want to use in your life. And it's unique and authentic to each individual person. That being said, the basic steps are to answer the call, heal yourself, and heal others. And again, keep in mind that this is an ongoing process. Just like there is no point where you are finally officially healed and there is no other inner work to ever do. Just like the universe is infinite, so is our inner work. And same thing with when you're working with others. But again, just to be clear, usually there is some sort of invitation, whether you've been initiated or you're feeling the call. It can be as simple as having the desire, or feeling like you're having memories, or just having a longing. It doesn't come into your life if it's not an invitation. You wouldn't be intrigued by it if you weren't receiving an invitation. And so your first step in becoming a shamanic healer is accepting that invitation. And that might include receiving some training, receiving some healing work. It might look like an actual meeting with the spirits, but just know, again, there's a big spectrum on what that can look like. The invitation, the half of it is getting the invitation, the other half of it is saying yes. And that's really, really the biggest step. You don't have to then run away from your regular life and dress in spiritual garbs and feathers to be a shaman or to follow the shamanic path. All it is, again, is that invitation and that saying yes and taking it step by step from there. The second part, healing yourself, is the process of doing that deep inner work, working directly with the spirits, helping, learning to trust yourself and follow their guidance and follow your own guidance from your higher self, and learning to respond to it with less hesitation each time. And then, of course, last but not least, is healing others. So that's taking the wisdom and the experience and the self-healing that you've been through and becoming a guide for other people, helping to show them the way, helping to restore harmony within the community. Ultimately, that is what the job of the shaman is to restore harmony in ourselves, in the earth, in our communities. And so you can see how this whole process would be something that repeats itself as well. Just like you get a call the first time, you will also get the call throughout the rest of your life to different stages and different types of shamanism or different types of spiritual growth. And that can come in the form of a nudge and just some excitement and curiosity. It can come in the form of initiation, where you are really given big signs from life with very little choice other than to follow those. Of course, we know that the inner healing work is something that's ongoing, and so is the work of healing others. These 3 steps will constantly inform and reinform each other. And that's what makes it a lifelong process. Have you been hearing the call to expand your spiritual gifts and step into your next level of conscious leadership? If you're a coach, healer, or a spiritual leader, you can learn more about Shaman School and growing your spiritual business on our website, holtonhealingarts.com, or send me a DM at Holton Healing Arts. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Leading with Spirit. If you did, please share the link for this episode with your biggest takeaway, tagging me at Holton Healing Arts. It would also support me if you subscribed and left a rating and review of the show so we can support more people living their highest purpose. Until next time, journey on.